Now, fresh wave of protest has erupted in Indonesia over proposed changes to the country's election law. And at the receiving end of the public dissent is the country's President Joko Widodo, outgoing one. Earlier in the day, protesters were seen clashing with the police in the capital. Demonstrators have set fire to several items on the road as public outrage poured onto the streets. The demonstrations erupted as the country's parliament prepared to reverse a constitutional court order with respect to age requirements for candidates ahead of the upcoming regional polls.
I came here to the Parliament building to represent the aspiration of the people because this country is now not in good condition. It has been damaged, especially because of President Joko Widodo and his cronies.
The Parliament's move to alter the election law supersedes a court ruling that made President Widodo's youngest son, 29-year-old Keseng Bangurap, ineligible to contest. Dissenters and critics are slamming the legislative change, alleging that the incumbent president is trying to retain political influence.
Today, the state of democracy in Indonesia is messy and not in good order because of a lot of interference by Joko Widodo, who is abusing his power in the government.
While protests broke out only recently, dissent among people has been brewing for a while now. Months earlier, several critics and Indonesians levied accusations of nepotism after the Indonesian president's eldest son was elected as the country's youngest vice president. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
This is the scene outside Indonesia's national parliament in Jakarta. They're trying to burn down the gates. Protesters have a mock guillotine for the President Joko Widodo. And there are also demonstrations going on in cities across Java. People here believe that the politicians inside are trying to bend and rig Indonesia's laws for the sake of the President and his family's power. Now, a bit of context. There are local elections coming up in a few months in Indonesia. It's widely rumoured that the President's youngest son, Kaisang, wants to contest those elections. The problem is he's 29. Under the law, you have to be 30. His supporters earlier this week challenged that at Indonesia's constitutional court, but the court ruled that the existing laws must stay in place. The court also made another ruling which would pave the way for a high-profile critic of President Joko Widodo to more easily run for the key post, Governor of Jakarta. Now, since that court ruling, politicians in the huge coalition that back the president have been madly scrambling to rewrite Indonesia's laws to circumvent that court ruling, to pave the way for the president's youngest son to run and to pave the way for the president's critic to be barred from running. And protesters here, they're not having a bar of it.
This is about the Indonesia falling apart again because the nepotism, because the new rules leads to nepotism.
The mess will continue until Joko Widodo is out from Indonesian politics for good.
Now, Joko Widodo himself, he has said that this is all just part of the back and forth, the checks and balances of Indonesian democracy. But these protests
Indonesia's Deputy Speaker has confirmed that Parliament will not ratify changes to election laws that sparked protests in Jakarta and in multiple cities across the country. Lawmakers need more time to deliberate. Earlier, security forces fired tear gas and water cannon at demonstrators, angered by the changes they say would have strengthened the influence of outgoing President Joko Widodo. Let's get more from Chatni Vavani. She is joining us from Jakarta. First of all, Chatni, talk us through what Parliament actually said about dropping those changes.
Well, Jill, eventful is certainly one way to describe today's events. Deputy Speaker of the Parliament, Sufi Dasko Ahmad, has confirmed that the planned ratification of the revised regional election law has been cancelled. He has said that what will apply at the time of registration of candidates next week on August 27 is the decision passed by the Constitutional Court. Mr. Dasko explained one of the factors that went into cancelling the planned ratification is that the plenary meeting could only be held on Thursday and Tuesday. Therefore, he said it would be impossible for the Parliament to pass the bill next Tuesday, which is the first day of registration for the regional elections. Now, he also confirmed that there would be no more plenary meetings tonight, as had been widely speculated. And so this means that Indonesia's legislature will not ratify changes to the election rules during the current government's term.
And how has that impacted the demonstrators? What's the situation on the ground right now?
Well, the scenario now quite different from when I was there just a few hours ago. Earlier, I stood among thousands of protesters angry at what they perceived to be efforts by the government to undercut a constitutional court ruling that will open, or rather has opened up, elections to rival candidates from smaller parties. Now, protesters I spoke to said that they would keep showing up until the Parliament decided to drop its ratification plans. Some protesters I spoke to also said that they felt the Parliament was crossing the line and the sanctity of the Constitution. Demonstrators also managed to enter the grounds of the Parliament building by breaking a section of the front fence, and police armed with shields and batons were then forced to push the protesters out of the Parliament grounds. Indonesian security forces also fired tear gas and water cannons at demonstrators gathered outside the parliamentary building that we were at. And the situation clearly dynamic and developing. And with these latest developments, the protesters, while they are still there outside of the Parliament complex, they are seen to be slowly dispersing themselves.
Appreciate that update.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Sambut